Welcome back to my channel. I'm the Epileptic Explorer, and tonight we will go ahead and continue our reading in Star Wars Darth Bane, Path to Destruction. This is the first book of a trilogy, and I am a huge fan of this character. I have been a fan of this character for such a long time. I've been meaning to look for. Excuse me 1 second. Come on. Sorry, cats. Anywho, I've been excited about this book for quite some time, and I got to read some of it last video. So this video coming up, tonight's video, we'll be reading more of this. So I am looking forward to reading it. Sorry. What's up? Gotta record. Lily Bell, be nice to her. Excuse me 1 moment, please. Oh, sorry. Scoot. Ugh. My apologies. Almost had a cat fight there. Anywho, let's go ahead and read Star Wars. Des approached the sabacc table and nodded to the Beta 4 card shark dealing out the hands. Oro preferred automated droids to organic dealers. No salary to pay, and there was no chance a wily gambler would convince a droid to cheat. "I'm in," he declared, taking the empty seat. The ensign was sitting directly across from him. He let out a long, loud whistle. "Blast, you're a big boy," he shouted boisterously. "How tall are you? 190? 195? 10 meters. Even," Des replied without looking at him. He swiped his Oro account card through the reader built into the table and punched in his security code. The buy-in for the table was added to the total already owing on his Oro account, and the card shark obediently pushed a stack of chips across the table toward him. "Good luck, sir," it said. The ensign continued to size Des up, take another long drink from his mug. Then he brayed out a laugh. "Wow, they grow you fellas out here on the rim. You sure you ain't really a Wookiee? Somebody shaved for a joke?" A few of the other players laughed, but quickly stopped when they saw Des clench his jaw. The man smelled of Corallian ale, same as Gerd had when he'd pick a fight with Des just a few hours earlier. Dez's muscles tightened and he leaned forward in his chair. The smaller man let out a short, nervous breath. "Come now, son," the commander said to Des in a calming voice, stepping in to control the situation the same way he'd been controlling the table all game long. He had an air of quiet authority, a patriarch presiding over a family squabble at the dinner table. "It's just a joke. Can't you take a joke?" Turning to face the only player at the table good enough to give him a real challenge, Des flashed a grin and let the tension slip from his coiled muscles. "Sure, I can take a joke," says, excuse me. "Sure, I can take a joke, but I'd rather take your credits." There was a brief pause, and then it was as if everyone had sighed in relief. The officer chuckled and returned the smile. "Fair enough. Let's play some cards." Des started slow, playing conservatively and folding often. The limits on the table were low. The maximum value of any given card was capped at 100 credits. Between the 5 credit ante and the 2 credit administration fee, Oro charged players each time they started a new round. The hand pots would barely cover the cost of sitting down at the table, even for a solid player. The trick was to win just enough hand pots to be able to stick around long enough for a chance at the sabak pot that continued to build with each hand. When he first started playing, one of the soldiers tried to make small talk. "I noticed most of the human miners here shave their heads," he said, nodding out at the crowd. "Why is that?" "We don't shave. Our hair falls out," Des replied. "Comes from working too many shifts in the mines." "Working the mines? I don't get it." "The filters don't remove all the impurities from the air. You work 10-hour shifts, day in and day out, and the containments build up in your system." He spoke in a flat, neutral voice. There was no bitterness. For him and the rest of the miners, it was just a fact of life. It has side effects. We get sick a lot. Our hair falls out. We're supposed to take a few days off now and again. But ever since Oro signed those Republic military contracts, the mines never shut down. Basically, we're being slowly poisoned to make sure your cargo holds full when you leave. That was enough to kill any other attempts at conversation, and they continued their hands in relative silence. After half an hour, Des was about even for the night, but he was just getting warmed up. He pushed in his ante and the Oro cut, as did the other 7 players at the table. The dealer flipped 2 cards out to each of them, and another hand began. The first 2 players peeked at their cards and folded. The Republic ensign glanced at his cards and threw in enough chips to stay in the hand. Des wasn't surprised. He hardly ever folded his cards, even when he had nothing. The ensign quickly pushed one of his cards into the interference field. Each turn, a player could move one of the electronic chip cards into the interference field, locking in its value to protect it from changing if there was a shift at the end of the round. Des shook his head. Locking in cards was a fool's play. You couldn't discard a locked-in card. Des usually preferred to keep all his options open. The ensign, however, was thinking in the short term, not planning ahead. That probably explained why he was down several hundred credits on the night. Glancing at his own hand, Des chose to stay in. All the rest of the players dropped, leaving just the 2 of them. The card shark dealt out another round of cards. Des glanced down and saw he had drawn Endurance, a face card with a value of -8. He was sitting at a total of 6, an incredibly weak hand. The smart move was to fold. Unless there was a shift, he was dead. But Des knew there was going to be a shift. He knew it as surely as he had known where and when Gerd's thumb was going to be when he bit down on it. These brief glimpses into the future didn't happen often, but when they did, he knew enough to listen to them. He pushed it in his credits. The ensign matched the bet. The droid scooped the chips to the center of the table, and the marker in front of him began to pulse with rapidly changing colors. Blue meant no shift. All the cards could stay the same. Red meant a shift. An impulse would be sent out from the marker, and one electronic card from each player would randomly reset and change its value. The marker flickered back and forth between red and blue, gaining speed until it was pulsing so quickly the colors blurred into a single violet hue. Then the flashing began to slow down, and it became possible to tell the individual colors apart again. Blue, red, blue, red, blue. It stopped on red. "Blast!" the ensign swore. "It always shifts when I have a good hand." Dez knew that wasn't true. The chances of shifting were 50-50, completely random. There was no way to predict whether a shift was coming, unless you had a gift like Dez occasionally did. The cards flickered as they reset, and Dez scooped up his hand one more time. Endurance was gone, replaced by a 7. He was sitting at 21. Not a sabak, but a solid hand. Before the next round could begin, Dez flipped his cards over, exposing his hand to the table. Coming up on 21, he said. The ensign threw his cards to the table in disgust. Blasted bomb out! Dez collected the small stack of chips that were the hand pot, while the other man grudgingly paid his penalty into the sabak pot. Dez guessed it was closing in on 500 credits by now. One of the miners at the table stood up. Come on, we got to go, he said. Last speeder leaves in 20 minutes. With grumbles and complaints, the other miners got up from their seats and trudged off to start their shift. The ensign watched them go, then turned curiously to Dez. You ain't going with them, big fella? I thought you were complaining about never getting a day off earlier. I work the day shift, Dez said shortly. Those guys are the night shift. Where's the rest of your crew? The lieutenant asked. Dez clearly recognized her interest as an attempt to keep the ensign from saying something to further antagonize the big miner. The crowd's become awfully thin. She waved her hand around at the cantina. Now it's virtually empty except for the Republic naval soldiers. Seeing the open seats at the sabak table, a few of them were wandering over to join their comrades in the game. They'll be along soon enough, Dez said. I just ended my shift a bit early today. Really? Her tone implied that she knew of only one reason a miner's shift might end early. Lieutenant, one of the newly arrived soldiers said politely as they reached the table. Commander, he added, addressing the other officer. Mind if we join in, sir? The commander looked over at Dez. I don't want this young man to think the Republic is ganging up on him. If we take all the seats, where are his friends going to sit when they show up? He says they'll be along any minute. They're not here now, Dez said, and they're not my friends. You might as well sit down. He didn't add that most of the day shift miners probably wouldn't play anyway. When Dez showed up at the table, they tended to call it a night. He won too often for their liking. The empty seats were quickly filled up. So how are the cards treating you, Ensign? A young woman asked the man Dez had bested in the last hand. She sat down beside him and placed a full mug of Corellian ale on the table in front of him. Not so good, he admitted, flashing a grin and exchanging his empty mug for the full one. I might have to owe you for this drink. I can't seem to catch a break tonight. He nodded his head in Dez's direction. Watch out for this one. He's as good as a commander. Either that or he cheats. He smiled quickly to show it was just another of his mildly offensive jokes. Dez ignored him. It wasn't the first time he'd been called a cheat. He was aware that his precognition gave him an advantage over the other players. Maybe it was an unfair advantage, but he didn't consider it cheating. It wasn't as if he knew what was going to happen on every hand. He couldn't control it. He was just smart enough to make the most of it when it happened. The card shark began passing out chips to the newcomers, wishing each of them a perfunctory good luck as it did so. So, you don't really get on well with the other miners, the lieutenant said, keying on Dez's earlier comments. Have you ever thought about changing careers? Dez groaned inwardly. By the time he had joined the table, the officers had given up their recruiting spiel and stuck mostly to playing cards. Now he'd given her an opening to bring it up again. I'm not interested in becoming a soldier, he said, anting up for the next hand. Don't be so hasty, she said, her voice slipping into a soothing, gentle patter. Being a soldier for the Republic has its rewards. I suspect it's better than working the mines, at least. There's a whole galaxy out there, son, the commander added. Worlds a lot more attractive than this one, if you don't mind me saying. I don't know. I don't know it, Des thought. Out loud, he said, I don't plan to spend my whole life here, but when I do get off this rock, I don't want to spend my days dodging Sith blasters on the front lines. We won't be fighting the Sith for much longer, son. We've got them on the run now, the commander spoke with such calm assurance. Des was half tempted to believe him. That's not how I hear it, Des said. Rumor is the Brotherhood of Darkness has been winning more than its share of the battles. I heard it's got more than a dozen regions under its control now. That was before General Hoth, one of the other soldiers, chimed in. Des had heard of Hoth on the HoloNet. He was a bona fide hero of the Republic, victorious in half a dozen major confrontations. He was a brilliant strategist who knew how to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. Not surprising, given his background. Hoth? He asked innocently, glancing down at his cards. Garbage. He folded his hand. Isn't he a Jedi? Oh, sorry. Hoth? He asked innocently, glancing down at his cards. Garbage. He folded his hand. Isn't he a Jedi? He is, the commander replied, peeking at his own cards. He pushed a small wager. A Jedi Master, to be more accurate, and a fine soldier, too. Couldn't ask for a better man to lead the Republic war effort. The Sith are more than just soldiers, you know, the drunken ensign said earnestly, his voice even louder than before. Some of them can use the Force, just like the Jedi. You can't beat them with blasters alone. Des had heard plenty of wild tales of Jedi performing extraordinary feats through the mystical power of the Force, but he figured they were legends and myth, or at least exaggerations. He knew there were more powers that transcended the physical world. His own premonitions were evidence of that, but the stories of what the Jedi could do were just too impossible to believe. If the Force was really such a powerful weapon, why was this war taking so long? The idea of answering to a Jedi Master doesn't really appeal to me, he said. I've heard some strange things about what they believe in. No passion, no emotion. Sounds like they want to turn us all into droids. Another round of cards was dealt out to the remaining players. The Jedi are guided by wisdom, the commander explained. They don't let things like desire or anger cloud their judgment. Anger has its uses, Des pointed out. It's gotten me out of some nasty spots. I think the trick is not to get into those spots in the first place, the lieutenant encountered in her gentle voice. The hand ended a few turns later. The young woman who had bought the ensign his drink came up on 20. Not a great hand, but not a bad one either. She looked over at the commander as he flipped up his cards and smiled when he had only 19. Her smile faded when the drunken ensign showed his 21. When he scooped up the pot, she cut his laugh short with a friendly elbow to his ribs. Everyone anteed, and the dealer flicked out another pair of cards to each player. The Jedi are the defenders of the Republic, the lieutenant went on earnestly. Their ways can seem strange to ordinary citizens, but they're on our side. All they want is peace. Really? Des said, glancing at his cards and pushing in his chips. I thought they wanted to wipe out the Sith. The Sith are an illegal organization, the lieutenant explained. She folded her cards after a moment of careful deliberation. The Senate passed a bill outlining them nearly 3,000 years ago, shortly after Raven and Malik brought destruction to the entire galaxy. I always heard Raven saved the Republic, he said. The commander jumped back into the conversation. Raven's story is complicated, he said, but the fact he remains the Sith and their teachings were the fact remains. The Sith and their teachings were banned by the Senate. Their very existence is a violation of Republic law, and with good reason. The Jedi understand the threat of the threat the Sith represent. That's why they've joined the fleet. For the good of the galaxy, the Sith must be wiped out once and for all. The drunken ensign won the hand again, his second in a row. Sometimes it was better to be lucky than good. So the Republic says the Sith must be wiped out, Des said as he anteed up for the next hand. If the Sith were the ones in charge, I bet they'd say the same thing about the Jedi. You wouldn't say that if you knew what the Sith were really like, one of the other soldiers said. I fought against them. They're bloodthirsty killers, Des laughed. Yeah, how dare they try to kill you in the middle of a war? Don't they know you're busy trying to kill them? How rude! You bloody calf-mutt, the soldier snapped, rising up from his seat. Sit down, deckman, the commander barked. The soldier did as he was told, but Des could feel the tension in the air. Everyone else at the table, with the possible exception of the two officers, was glaring at him. Good. The last thing on their minds now was cards. Angry people didn't make good sabacc players. The commander sensed things were bad too. He did his best to defuse the situation. The Sith follow the teachings of the dark side, son, he said to Des. If you saw the kinds of things they've done during this war, and not just to other soldiers, they don't care if innocent civilians suffer. Only half listening, Des glanced at his cards and placed a wager. I'm not stupid, Commander, he said then. Whether the Republic officially acknowledges it or not, you're at war with the Brotherhood of Darkness, and bad things happen during a war on both sides. So don't try to convince me the Sith are monsters. They're people, just like you and me. Of all the players at the table, only the commander folded his cards. Des knew that at least a few of the soldiers were playing bad hands simply for the chance to take him down. The commander sighed. You're right, to a point. The ordinary troopers who serve in this army because they don't know what the Sith Masters and the Brotherhood of Darkness are really like are just people. But you have to look at the ideals behind this war. You have to understand what each side really stands for. Enlighten me, Commander. Des put just a hint of condescension in his voice and casually tossed in some more chips. Knowing it would rile up the table even more, he was glad to see that nobody folded. He was playing them like a Bith musician thrilling out a tune on a separate. The Jedi seek to preserve peace, the commander reiterated. They serve the cause of justice. Whenever possible, they use their power to aid those in need. They seek to serve, not to rule. They believe that all things, regardless of species or gender, are created equal. Surely you can understand that. It was more a statement than a question, but Des answered anyway. But all beings aren't equal, are they? I mean, some are smarter, or stronger, or better at cards. He drew a small smile from the commander with the last comment, though anyone else at the table scowled. True enough, son, but isn't it the duty of the strong to help the weak? Des shrugged. He didn't believe much in equality Working to make everybody equal didn't leave much chance for anyone to achieve greatness. So what about the so what about the Brotherhood of Darkness? He asked. What do they believe in? They follow the teachings of the dark side. The only thing they seek is power. They believe the natural order of the galaxy is for the weak to serve the strong. Sounds pretty good if you're one of the strong. Des flipped his cards, then scooped up the pot, relishing the grumbling and curses muttered under the breath of the losers. Des flashed a nasty grin around the table. For the Republic of the for the sake of the Republic, I hope you guys are better soldiers than you are sabacc players. You mudcrutch rantqueed coward, the ensign shouted, jumping up and spilling his drink onto the floor. If it wasn't for us, the Sith be would be all over this pit of a world. Another miner would have taken a swing at Dez, but the ensign, even more than slightly drunk, had enough military discipline to keep his fists at his sides. A stern glare from the commander made him sit down and mumble an apology. Dez was impressed and a little disappointed. We all know why the Republic cares about Apratros, he said, stacking his chips and trying to appear nonchalant. In fact, he was scanning the table to see if anyone else was getting ready to make a move on him. You use cortosis in the holes of your ships. You use it in your weapons casings. You even use it in your body armor. Without us, you wouldn't stand a chance in this war. So don't pretend you're doing any favors here. You need us as much as we need you. Nobody had anted yet. All eyes were drawn to the drama unfolding among the players. The card shark hesitated, its limited programming uncertain how to handle the situation. Dez knew Groshik was watching from the far side of the cantina, his hand near the stun blaster he kept stashed behind the bar. He doubted the Nemodian would need it, though. True enough, the commander conceded, pushing his ante in. The others, including Dez, followed suit. But at least we pay you for the cortosis we use. The Sith would just take it from you. No, Dez corrected, studying his cards. You pay Oro for the cortosis. Those credits don't make it all the way down to a guy like me. He folded his hand but didn't stop talking. See, that's the problem with the Republic. In the core, everything's great. People are healthy, wealthy, and happy. But out here on the rim, things aren't so easy. I've seen working the mines almost as long as I can remember, in one way or another, and I still owe Oro enough credits to fill a freighter hole. But I don't see any Jedi coming to save me from that little bit of injustice. Nobody had an answer for him this time, not even the commander. Dez decided they talked enough politics. He wanted to focus on winning the 2,000 credits that had built up in the sabacc pot. He went in for the kill. Don't try to sell me on your Jedi and your Republic, because that's exactly what it is. Your Republic. You say the Sith only respect strength? Well, that's pretty much the way things are out here on the rim too. You look out for yourself because nobody else will. That's why the Sith keep finding new recruits willing to join them out here. People with nothing feel like they've got nothing to lose, and if the Republic doesn't figure that out pretty soon, the Brotherhood of Darkness is going to win this war no matter how many Jedi you have leading your army. Maybe we should just stick to cards, the lieutenant suggested after a long, uncomfortable silence. That works for me, Dez said. No hard feelings. No hard feelings, the commander said, forcing a smile. A few of the other soldiers murmured assent, but Dez knew the hard feelings were still there. He'd done everything he could to make sure they ran deep. That is the end of chapter 3. We are on chapter 4 as of right now, and yeah, I'll go ahead and read this next chapter. This next chapter here. What time is it? 30. Yeah, I got time. Okay. All right. Chapter 4. The hours ticked by. The miners began to arrive. The day shift coming in to replace the night crew that had left. The card shark kept dealing, and the players kept betting. Dez's stack of chips was growing steadily larger, and the sabak pot kept on growing. 3,000 credits, 4,000, 5. None of the players seemed to be having fun anymore. Dez figured his scorching rant had turned off all the pleasure from the game. Dez didn't care. He didn't play sabak for fun. It was a job, same as working the mines. A way to earn credits and pay off Oro so he could leave Apatros behind forever. 2 of the soldiers pushed away from the table, their credits cleaned out. Their seats were soon filled by miners from the day shift. The lure of the massive sabak pot was enough to draw them in, despite their reluctance to go up against Dez. Another hour passed, and the senior officers, the lieutenant and the commander, finally packed it in. They too were replaced by miners with visions of hitting one good hand and cashing in the unclaimed sabak pot. The Republic soldiers who stuck around, like the ensign who had first challenged Dez, must have deep, deep pockets. With the constant influx of new players and new money, Dez was forced to change his strategy. He was up several hundred credits. He had enough of a cushion built up that he could afford to lose a few hands if he had to. Now his only concern was protecting the sabak pot. If he didn't have a hand he thought he could win with, he'd come up in the first few turns. He wasn't going to give anyone else a chance to build up a hand of 23. He stopped folding, even when he had weak cards. Sitting out a hand gave the other players too much of a chance to win. Some lucky shifts and some poor choices by his opponents made sure his strategy worked, though not without a cost. His efforts to protect the sabak pot began to eat into his profits. His stack of winnings shrank quickly, but it would all be worth it if he won the sabak pot. Through hand after agonizing hand, players continued to come and go. One by one, the soldiers gave up their seats, forced out when they ran out of chips and couldn't afford more. Of the original group, only Dez and the ensign remained. The ensign's pile was growing. A few of the soldiers stayed to watch, rooting for their man to beat the miner with the big mouth. Other spectators came and went. Some were just waiting for a player to drop so they could swoop in and take the seat. Others were drawn by the intensity of the table and the size of the pots. After another hour of the sabak pot hit 10,000 chips, the maximum limit. Any credits paid into the sabak pot now were wasted. They went straight into the Oro accounts, but nobody complained, with a chance to win a small fortune on the table. Des glanced up at the chrono on the wall. The cantina would be closing in less than an hour. When he first sat down at the table, he'd felt certain he was going to win big. For a while he had been ahead, but the last few hours had drained his chips. Working to protect the sabak pot was crippling him. He'd gone through all his profits and had to rebuy in twice. He'd fallen into the classic gambler's trap, becoming so obsessed with winning the big pot that he'd lost sight of how much he was losing. He let the game get personal. His shirt was hot and sticky with sweat. His legs were numb from sitting so long, and his back was aching from hunching forward expectantly to study his cards. He was down almost 1,000 credits on the night, but none of the other players had been able to cash in on his misfortune. But the sabak pot capped all the antes and penalties went straight to Oro. He'd have to work a month of grueling shifts in the mines if he ever wanted to see any of those credits again. But it was too late to turn back now. His only consolation was that the Republic ensign was down at least twice as much as he was. Yet each time the man ran out of chips, he just reached into his pocket and pulled out another stack of credits, as if he had unlimited funds, or as if he just didn't care. The card shark fired out another hand. As he peeked at his cards, Des began to feel the first real hints of self-doubt. What if his feeling was wrong this time? What if this wasn't his night to win? He couldn't remember a moment in the past. He couldn't remember a moment in the past when his gift had betrayed him, but that didn't mean it couldn't happen. He pushed his chips in with a weak hand, defying every instinct that told him to fold. He'd have to come up at the start of the next turn, no matter how weak his cards were. Any longer and someone else might steal the sabak pot he was working so hard to collect. The marker flickered and the card shifted. Des didn't bother to look. He simply flipped over his cards and muttered, "Coming up." When he saw his hand, he felt like he'd been slapped. He was sitting at negative 23 exactly. A bomb out. Penalty cleaned out his stack of chips. "Whoa, big fella," the ensign mocked drunkenly. "You must be loam-soaked to come up on that. What the bricks were you saying? Were you thinking?" "Maybe he doesn't understand the difference between plus 23 and minus 23, said one of the soldiers watching the match, grinning like a Monka cat. Des tried to ignore them as he paid the penalty. He felt empty, hollow. "You don't talk so much when you're losing, huh?" the ensign sneered. Hate. Des didn't feel anything else at first. Pure, white, hot hatred consumed every thought, every motion, and every ounce of reason in his brain. Suddenly, he didn't care about the pot, didn't care about how many credits he had already lost. All he wanted was to wipe the smug expression from the ensign's face, and there was only one way he could do it. He shot a savage glare in the ensign's direction. But the man was too drunk to be intimidated without taking his eyes off his enemy. Des swiped his Oro account card into the reader and rang up another buy-in, ignoring the logical part of his mind that tried to talk him out of it. The card shark, its circuits and wires oblivious to what was really going on, pushed a stack of chips toward him and uttered its typically cheery, "Good luck." Des opened with the ace and two of sabers. He was at 17, a dangerous hand. Lots of potential to go too high on his next card and bomb out. He hesitated, knowing that the smart move was to fold. Having second thoughts, the ensign chided. Acting on an impulse he couldn't even explain, Des moved his two into the interference field, then pushed his chips into the pot. He was letting his emotions guide him, but he no longer cared. And when the next card came up as a 3, he knew what he had to do. He shoved his 3 into the interference field beside the 2 that was already there. Then he bet the maximum wager and waited for the switch. There were actually 2 ways to win the sabak pot. One was to get a hand that totaled 23 exactly, a pure sabak. But there's an even better hand, the Idiot's Array. In modified Bespin rules, If you had a hand of 2 or 3 in the same suit and drew the face card known as the idiot, which had no value at all, you had an idiot's array. 23 in the literal sense. It was the rarest hand possible, and it was worth more than even a pure sabacc. Dez was 2/3 of the way there. All he needed now was a switch to take his 10 and replace it with the idiot. Of course, that meant there had to be a switch, and even then he'd have to draw the idiot off it. And there were only 2 idiots in the entire 76 card deck. It was a ridiculous long shot. The marker came up red. The cards shifted. Dez didn't even have to look at his hand. He knew. He stared right into the ensign's eyes. Coming up! The ensign looked down at his hand to see what the switch had given him, and began to laugh so hard he could barely show his hand. He had the 2 of flasks, the 3 of flasks, and the idiot. There were gasps of surprise and murmurs of disbelief from the crowd. "How do you like that one, boys?" He cackled. "Idiot's array on the switch!" He stood up, reaching out for the stack of chips on the small pedestal that sat in the center of the table representing the sabacc pot. Dez whipped his hand out and snagged the young man's wrist in a grip as cold and hard as Durasteel, then flipped over his own cards. The entire cantina became silent as a tomb. The ensign's laughter died in his throat. A second later, he pulled his hand free and sat back down, dumbfounded. From the far edge of the table, somebody let out a long, low whistle of amazement. The rest of the crowd burst into noise. "Never in my life! Can't believe it! Statistically impossible! 2 idiots arrays in the same hand?" The card shark summarized the result in the purest analytical fashion. "We have 2 players with hands of equal value. The hand will be determined by a sudden demise." The ensign didn't react with the same kind of calm. "You stupid mud crutch," he spat out. His voice strangled with rage. "Now nobody's going to get that sabacc pot." His eyes bulged out widely. A vein was pulsing on his forehead. One of his fellow soldiers had placed a hand on his shoulder, as if afraid his friend might leap across the table to try to choke the life out of the miner on the other side. The ensign was right. Neither of them would be collecting the sabacc pot on his hand. In a sudden demise, each player was dealt 1 more card, and the value of the hands was recalculated. If you had the better hand, you'd win, but you wouldn't get the sabacc pot unless you scored 23 exactly. That, however, seemed impossible. There were no more idiots to deal out to preserve an idiot's array, and no single card had a value higher than the ace's 15. Not that Dez cared. It was enough to have destroyed his opponent's will, to have crushed his hopes and robbed him of his victory. He could feel the ensign's hate, and he responded to it. It was like a living being, an entity he could draw a strength from, fueling his own raging inferno. But Dez didn't put his emotions out on display for the rest of the crowd to see. The hate burning in him was his own private store. A power raging inside him, so fierce he felt it could crack the world if he let it escape. The dealer flicked out 2 cards face up for everyone to see. They were both 9s. Before anyone even had time to react, the droid had recalculated the hand, determined that the 2 players were still tied, and fired out another card to each of them. The ensign took an 8, but Dez got another 9. Idiot. 2, 3, 9, 9. 23. He reached out slowly and tapped his cards, whispering a single word to his opponent. Sabacc. The soldier went ballistic. He leapt up, grabbed the underside of the table with both hands, and gave a mighty heave. Only the weight of the table and the built-in stabilizers kept it from flipping over, though it rocked and slammed back into the ground with a deafening crash. All the drinks on it spilled over. Ale and lum washed across the electronic cards, causing the spark and short out. Sir, sir, please don't touch the table, the card shark implored in a pitiful voice. Shut up, you hunk of rusted scrap metal! The ensign grabbed one of the overturned mugs from the table and hurled it at the droid. It connected with a ringing thud. The droid stumbled back and fell over. The ensign thrust a finger at Dez. You cheated! Nobody gets Sabak on a sudden demise unless he cheats. Dez didn't say anything. He didn't even stand up, but his muscles were braced in case the soldier made a move. The ensign turned back to the droid as it rose shakily to its feet. You're in on it! He threw another mug at it, connecting again and dropping the droid a second time. Two of the other soldiers tried to restrain him, but he shook free of their grip. He spun around, waving his arms at the crowd. You're all in on it! Dirty, Sith-loving scum! You hate the Republic! You hate us! We know you do. We know. The miners pushed in closer, grumbling angrily. The ensign's insults weren't far off the mark. There were a lot of bad feelings toward the Republic on Apatros. And if he didn't watch his mouth, somebody was going to show him just how strong those feelings were. We give our lives to protect you, but you don't give a wobber. Any chance to humiliate us, you take it. His friends had grabbed him again, trying to wrestle him out the door, but there was no way they could get through the crowd now. From the looks on their faces, the soldiers were terrified. With good reason, Des thought. None of them was armed. Their blasts were back on their ship. Now they were trapped in the center of a hostile crush of heavily muscled miners who'd been drinking all night, and their friend wouldn't shut up. You should get down on your knees and thank us each and every time we land on this ball of bantha sweat you call a planet. But you're too stupid to know how lucky you are to have us on your side. You're nothing but a bunch of filthy illiterate. A lum bottle hurled anonymously from the crowd struck him hard on the side of his head, cutting his words short. He dropped to the floor, dragging his friends down with him. Des stood motionless as a mass of angry miners surged. The sound of a blaster caused everyone to freeze. Groshik had climbed up onto the top of the bar, his stunner already charging up to fire again. But everybody knew the next shot wouldn't be aimed at the ceiling. We're closed, he croaked as loud as his raspy voice could manage. Everybody get out of my cantina. The miners began to back off, and the soldiers stood up warily. The ensign swayed, the cut in his forehead bleeding into his eye. You three first, the Nemodian said to the ensign and the soldiers who supported him. He waved the barrel of his weapon menacingly around the room. Clear a path. Get them out of here. Everyone but the soldiers remained frozen. This wasn't the first time Groshik had whipped out the stunner. The Blastech CS-33 fire spray stun rifle was one of the finest non-lethal crowd-controlled devices on the market, capable of incapacitating multiple targets with a single shot. More than a few of the miners had felt the brutal force of its wide beam blast, rendering them unconscious. From personal experience, Dez could attest to the fact that it wasn't a pain anyone was likely to forget. Once the Republic crew vanished into the night, The rest of the crowd began to move slowly toward the door. Des fell into step with the masses. But as he passed the bar, Groshek pointed the blaster right at him. Not you. You stay put. Des didn't move a millimeter until the others were gone. He wasn't scared. He didn't think Groshek would really fire. Still, he saw no advantage in giving him a reason to. Only after the last patron had left and closed the door did Groshek lower his arm. He clambered down awkwardly from the bar and set the rifle on the table, then turned to Des. I figured it was safer to keep you here with me for a bit, he explained. Those soldiers were pretty mad. They might be waiting for you on the walk home. Des smiled. I didn't figure you were mad at me, he said. Groshek snorted. Oh, I'm mad at you. That's why you're going to help me clean up this mess. Des sighed and shook his head in mock exasperation. You saw what happened, Groshek. I was just an innocent bystander. Groshek wasn't in any mood to hear it. Just start picking up the chairs, he muttered. With the help of the card shark, at least it was good for something besides dealing, Des thought. They finished cleaning up in just over an hour. When they were done, the droid waddled out on shaky legs, heading toward the maintenance facilities for repairs. Before it left, Des made sure the Sabacc winnings had been credited to his account. Now that it was just the two of them, Groshek motioned Des over to the bar, grabbed a couple of glasses, and took a bottle down from the shelf. Kortig brandy, he said, pouring them each half a glass. Direct from Kashyyyk. Not the hard stuff the Wookiees drink, though. Milder, smoother, more tame. Des took a sip and nearly choked. The fiery liquid burned its way down his throat. This is tame? This is tame? I'd hate to see what the Wookiees drink. Groshek shrugged. What do you expect? They're Wookiees. With a second sip, Des was more careful. He let it roll across his tongue, savoring the rich flavor. This is good, Groshek. This is good, Groshek. And expensive, I bet. What's the occasion? You had quite a day. I thought you could use it. Des drained his glass. Groshek filled him up halfway, then corked the bottle and set it back on the shelf. I'm worried about you, the Neimoidian rasped. Worried about what happened in the fight with Gerd. He didn't give me much choice. The Neimoidian nodded. I know. Still, you bit off his thumb, and tonight you nearly started a riot in my bar. Hey, I just wanted to play cards, Des protested. It's not my fault things got out of hand. Maybe, maybe not. I saw you tonight. You were goading that soldier, playing him like you play everyone who sits down against you. You push them, twist them, make them dance like puppets on a string. But this time you never let up. Even when you had the advantage, you kept pushing. You wanted him to go off like that. Are you saying I planned this whole thing? Des laughed. Come on, Groshek. It was the cards that set him off. You know I wasn't cheating. It's just not possible. How could I control what cards were dealt? It was more than the cards, Des, Groshek said. His graveling voice dropped so low that Des had to lean in close to hear. You were angry, Des. More angry than I've ever seen you before. I could feel it I could feel it from all the way across the room, like something in the air. We could all feel it. The crowd turned ugly in a hurry, Des. It was like they were feeding off your rage and your hate. You were projecting waves of emotion, a storm of anger and fury. Everyone else just kind of got swept up in it. The crowd, that soldier, everybody, even me. It was all I could do to aim the first shot from my blaster at the ceiling. Every instinct of my body was telling me to fire it into the crowd. I wanted to take them all down and leave them with writhing in pain. Des couldn't believe his ears. Listen to what you're saying, Groshek. It's crazy. You know I wouldn't do that. I couldn't do that. Nobody could. Groshek reached up a long, thin hand and patted Des on the shoulder. I know you'd never do it on purpose, Des, and I know how crazy it sounds, but there was something different about you tonight. You give in to your emotions and it unleashed something strange, something dangerous. Groshek tossed his head back and drained the last of his Kortig, shuddering as it went down. Just watch yourself, Des. Please. I've got a bad feeling. Be careful, Groshek, Des replied with another laugh. Nemodians aren't known for relying on their feelings. It's not good for business. Groshek studied him carefully for a moment, then nodded wearily. True. Maybe I'm just tired. I should get some sleep. And so should you. They shook hands, and Des left the cantina. That is the end of chapter 4. Let me just check this real quick. Yes, this is a great book. Wow. I'm probably going to call it a night for right now. As much as I want to continue reading, as much as I want to continue reading tonight, I have work in the morning, but I will come back tomorrow and read this again. So I hope you all enjoyed this channel. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Make a comment on this video. Tell me what you guys are thinking and if you guys are enjoying this book. Again, please subscribe to my channel. Hit the bell for all notifications so that you know when the next book like Star Wars comes out. And I hope to see you all in the next video. We are currently at 190 on subscribers as of tonight. And I hope that you guys can help me reach to 200. That would be a wonderful thing to see. So please help me to get to that goal. So we'll see you all in the next video. Until then, this is the Epileptic Explorer, and I hope you all have a fantastic evening, and above all, may the 4th be with you.